Okay, welcome back. We will continue our discussion on data. This panel is entitled Data Needs and Accessibility. We are very pleased to have with us Stacey Gabbard, Director, Customer Services Support at AEP, Laura Kier, did I pronounce that correctly?
You did.
Okay, Senior Associate Market Operations, EnergyHub, and Kristen Stovell, Director, Enterprise Analytics from IGS Energy. Thank you all very much for joining us. Stacey, you are up first. Please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Chairman Hott, for the invitation, the opportunity to talk about data. You know, I think this is a relevant topic. It's an exciting topic. The type of people that get excited about data are unique. I'm one of them. But it's also timely given some of the news of the day with Facebook and 50 million Facebook users that are wondering, should I care if my information has been shared around the world? Some may, some not. So it's an important topic for us to consider as we look forward for where we're going as an industry. I also want to thank Barb, Christina, and Chris for really setting the stage for this discussion and tackling EDI, which, Barb, I'm glad you were able to do that, and I didn't have to, because it's a dry topic, and making that fun and exciting is not necessarily easy to do. So what I'd like to talk about today is really the utilities and their role in creating the backbone of the future for the future of the grid. If you think of the grid of the future as that backbone for a connected grid, data is the spinal column of information that's going to be transferred, not only to customers, to utilities, but also to third parties and other service providers that are looking for opportunities to add value to the customer experience. So as I was preparing my slide deck, I did a lot of reflections. 28 years of service now in the industry. And I think back of how much change that we've seen in that period of time. And I think all of us here today share one thing in common. We're looking to leave this industry perhaps in a better place than we found it. When I started, we just got out of reading meters with a computer card. That's right. So meter readers would walk around and write on a computer card, and it would be scanned into a system. Now my career in the industry is just a sliver of time from when Edison and Tesla were debating on whether we're going to be AC or DC. I mean, 28 years, it's just a speck of time in that continuum. But look how far we've come in that short period of time. So we used to do only manual meter reads once a month. Industrial customers might have had a phone line and got interval data, but that was it. You know, we would only know about an outage if a customer called us, and we would work our orders from printed paper, and oftentimes in triplicate. And if you did not send one copy to the meter services group and one copy to accounting, you were going to hear about it, because I remember. So where are we today? We are now marching down a path of deploying over 800,000 AMI meters in Ohio for our service territory that will bring back granular 15-minute data for our customers. Customers will be notified and are currently notified of information based upon mobile apps, web services, alerts, by email or their phone. And our work management system is something that just rolls right to the truck from our systems. So where are we going tomorrow? You've heard a lot about this already. Microgrids, community storage, smart cities, fully connected homes, EV charging, distributed energy. What I would pose to you today is the future's already here. The question before you and us is, how are we going to bring these things to our customers, working collaboratively and utilizing the utility industry as that backbone and the spinal nexus for that data and information. So I think we're all excited about the future. I know I am. I know AEP Ohio is. We're also excited about leading the charge and being a change agent in the industry. We've done a lot of work, both on the customer experience side as well as supporting third parties in the industry. On the customer side, we've put a lot of functionality into our AEP Ohio mobile app or our website, where customers can log in, access information on their account, perform basic account maintenance like opens and closes. That's also where we have our green button functionality, where customers can download AMI interval data that if they have an AMI meter directly to their computer. We've also been an industry leader in terms of data analytics. When we have a lot of data, we can do a lot of things with it. For example, over the last several years, we've rolled over 2,000 trucks to check a meter enclosure because we are bringing back the temperature of the smart meter and comparing it to the average temperature of meters around it, where we can identify where the customer's enclosure may have a broken socket or some type of loose connection that could ultimately create a fire. We've had better than a 75% hit rate on that, and that is a value add for our customers. We've also done data analytics using AMI data so that we can change out transformers proactively rather than wait for them to fail using AMI data. And we've heard our customers who've said, here it is, I bet there's not a person in this room that doesn't have one. This is how we'd like to talk to you. So we have mobile app now, which does some functionality to support their account. And we also have It's Your Power, which allows customers to be able to access their energy bridge in their home and get real-time information through Powerly. So it's just not the customer experience we're working on. We're also been focusing on third-party experience. You may be familiar with the BPP Business Partner Portal that we implemented several years ago, which is functionality supporting the suppliers in the market, which allows them to download information on customers, for shopping purposes, for pricing, as well as for getting specific account level information for that customer. That's a website that we built using input from the CREST community. We met with different suppliers and asked, what do you like? What are other markets doing? And how would you like us to implement our system? That's also the system that we will have AMI interval data available to the suppliers with an LOA approval from customers to be able to access that information. We've also recently implemented time of use billing and settlement for CREST suppliers in the Ohio market, where they now have access to AMI meter programs and can create their own rate to implement for their customers and create their own prices based upon those pricing tiers. And we've recently implemented a third-party pole attachment portal for our communications companies that gives them access to our GIS coordinates for our distribution system so that they can selectively go in and identify the poles which they want to attach their communication network to, rather than walk around, write down a pole number, and then send it to us in a big packet. The feedback so far on that is they would like that to be implemented across the United States. And then finally, we're working with suppliers to implement supplier consolidated billing, which provides yet another method for customers to be billed in Ohio to meet their needs, where suppliers would put their information on our information on their bills. So one thing in common with all of this is it all takes data. And similar to the way that the utilities were leveraged when choice originally evolved as leveraging that capital investment for that infrastructure, we believe that utilities will also be leveraged to get us to tomorrow for that connected grid for our customers. And we do store a lot of information. A lot of it is critical to our business. A lot of it is also critical to third parties. For example, customer records, where we may store the contact information, financial information, PII information, which we hold very close to our chest and don't share easily. We also have a lot of usage and billing and settlement information for the CREST provider, for the customer with 15-minute level interval data, where they have a smart meter, rates, billing methods, settlement tags, PLCs, which you heard about earlier, which is used to aggregate the capacity obligations for the suppliers in the PJM market. And then we also have premise information that may also include any type of distributed generation resource that the customer has attached to our system, because we have to have that information to be able to manage our system. So all of this is necessary to perform our operations and to support our customers. But I think one thing that all of this panel will share in common when you hear from us, and that is data is only data. Our goal ultimately is to make it meaningful, make it relevant, make it actionable, and ultimately provide insightful value-add information for our customers. Otherwise, a customer's load at 12 o'clock without any context is of no value to a customer. Tell me how much I'm using at an hour and what appliance might be using it and what's causing my bill to be high. That's valuable information. What rate or service is best fit for me? Should I shop? Should I not shop? So this is valuable information for customers that we can use with data. And in AEP Ohio, we use multiple channels to provide that information, such as our call centers, website, mobile apps I referenced, texts, billing and email, as well as Energy Bridge through Powerly, where customers can access 3-second interval data directly from their meter to their apps. Likewise, third parties leverage the same information to try to answer very similar questions for their customers. With regard to third parties, we really are the clearinghouse for a lot of information in the market and for our customers. And we take that very seriously. We share information with CREST suppliers, which need that information to be able to price rates for customers, to bill their customers, to provide customer services. Aggregators also need information so that they can bid a community and provide the best rate for that community. Energy brokers also serve between the customer and the CREST, looking for the best rate for that particular customer. They also need information. We share information with energy efficiency and DR service providers, which you'll hear more in this panel. Curtailment service providers that may work on behalf of PJM to enroll customers in a curtailment program also need certain information. We also share an extensive amount of information with Ohio Development Services Agency, which manage PIP and HEAP, and a lot of that is very customer-specific information. It is tightly controlled and protected. And then, of course, we have an obligation to PJM, which settles the load in our RTO. They are the RTO, and we have to provide specific information to them so that they can perform their services. So third parties trust us. They have trusted us. We work closely with them to meet their needs, and we look to be that steward for data in the market. In addition, customers trust us. In 2015, AEP Ohio customers participated in 2 focus groups on data privacy, and the theme was the utilities are trusted entities. In fact, they were included with banks and healthcare in terms of how well we're trusted. So that is trust we don't take lightly, and we take very seriously how we protect their data. We feel it's well earned. If you look at the controls that we have in place to manage customer data, protect it, it's extensive. Some you'll hear about now, and Stan Partlow will talk more about it this afternoon on cyber and physical security. For customer data, we have red flag and PII controls, where only customers that have to have access to that data can view it. We have SOX access controls, where employees that should have access to system for their job can have access, and all other employees cannot access it. We have code of conduct firewalls, where affiliate companies of AEP don't even have access to systems, and oftentimes are not even in the same buildings as us. And then we also utilize letter of authorization, or LOAs, for other entities that request customer data, where we require the customer to release that information before it's shared from our systems. So as you can see, customer data is protected from breach and improper access in multiple ways. But for the connected grid of the future, just protection is not enough. Accuracy, as all of the suppliers in this room will tell you, is paramount. If the data is not accurate, it's of no value. And we do many things throughout the process to assure its accuracy. You've already heard about VEE, validations, estimation, and editing, which is performed for all of our interval data, be it through traditional Itron MV90 system or AMI systems. That data has to add up to the total metered load. There needs to be no gaps, and it has to be usable. That's called build quality data. And so we have to do that to make it available. We also have preventative SOX controls to check for excessive usage or low energy usage for customers. We may have a dead meter, and so that kicks it out to make sure that we identify that and fix the problem. We also have data governance that we do with our systems to make sure that the data is controlled. When CRESS ABC asks for load for a customer, and then we rebill that customer next week because we found an issue, that data has to be corrected and they have to be made, that fresh data has to be made available to them. And then finally, we have detective SOX controls on the back end, a final accuracy checkpoint before things go out the door. So all of this is done to assure third-party needs are met. And as I mentioned earlier, we share data with a lot of different entities in many ways. This slide is a summary of some of the different technology that we leverage to share information with third parties. PJM, we perform an XML upload for aggregated load by LSE or load serving entity to get our loads for the suppliers in our service territory for settlement on a daily basis, on a weekly basis for capacity, and then on a monthly basis for final reallocation. CRESS providers have access to information through EDI, which Barb mentioned earlier, as well as our web portal and email. And to that point, I'll echo some comments earlier by Christina. Different CRESS suppliers have different desires and needs for information. EDI, we have always looked across multiple markets as the glue that holds systems together. It's point-to-point file transfers of information that we need to do business in, and the market needs to do business. And it's not just limited to the choice markets. We also do EDI billing for our large national accounts, where we send bill information directly to service providers where they pay their bills for hundreds and hundreds of accounts all at one time via EDI. Energy brokers have access to the web portal as well as email. Aggregators, curtailment service providers are generally email provided. Ocean, which is the Development Services Agency, we have encrypted flat file secure FTP transaction that we have with them, and the reason it's encrypted is because that does have PII information in it that has to be encrypted. And then finally, we do with energy efficiency and demand response providers, flat file secure FTP, which is also very secure. So where do we go from here? In my opinion, we have made great progress. Clearly, if you look at where we came from 28 years ago when I started as a meter reader trying to figure out how to pay for college, we've come a long ways, but we still have ways to go. And I think we have a lot of good things going for us in Ohio right now. But I think there's some things that we need to keep in mind. First, we need to balance value-add customer experience with customer data protection. No utility in Ohio wants to be the Facebook of tomorrow where we find out in the news that our information was shared with some entity for some reason. That is paramount to our mission. Customer education is important. We still have customers that believe that the EDUs will call the police by looking at their AMI profile and feel that they may be doing something that's against the law. Clearly, we don't do that. We need to continue to focus on market standards where it makes sense, leveraging the EDI working group, continuously drive towards standardization, as well as leverage the ad hoc market development working group, because quite honestly, this collaborative and this conversation should not end today. It needs to continue. And the methodology that you have put forth in the past to do that is the working group, to allow different parties to get together and have these discussions about where we're going. We may not immediately come to a consensus, but it's a way to have that discussion. And then we need to have streamlined and automated systems, including the LOA process. We firmly believe that the LOA process is critical to protecting the customer information before it's shared with third parties, but it has to be as automated as possible because it can be very clunky. We do not want to go back to faxing LOAs back and forth to release information. It's a burden on third parties, it's a burden on the utilities, and it's a burden on customers. Enforcement and compliance is important. If you look across the different markets in the United States, there are bad actors. And I think I speak for a lot of the suppliers that I work with closely that they do not want that to happen in Ohio because it's a reflection on the entire market. And so there is a responsibility to be quick and swift with enforcement to make sure that if we do have bad actors that are utilizing data inappropriately, it's dealt with swiftly. And then finally, we should have a defined path for regulatory recovery of prudent costs. And I think our AMI Phase 2 deployment rider in AP Ohio is a perfect example of that. We are working collaboratively with different parties, and we have a charge, and we're moving forward. We know how those costs are going to be recovered. We know we need to be prudent with those investments, and we need to make the biggest bang for the buck for our customers. And that is ultimately our goal here today. What is the best thing for the customers? So in summary, I want to thank you. I do believe that the utilities are going to play an important role. I call it the backbone of the connected grid of the future, and this data is going to be the spinal column for it. And I think working together, we're going to get there. And I appreciate your time.
Stacey, thank you very much. Laura?
Hi, Laura from EnergyHub. Thank you so much for having me here today. I work in our energy markets team, so I manage our energy market programs, and I also am responsible for policy engagement in a lot of the energy markets in the states, and have been specifically involved in a lot of customer data access proceedings. So, okay. For those of you who are not familiar with EnergyHub, we provide DER management services for utilities, and we have been doing that since 2009. We're most well known for our demand response programs, specifically Bring Your Own Thermostat program, wherein customers can have choices with regard to what devices they enroll in programs. And as you can see, we have integrations with leading connected thermostat brands, and that experience has led us to expand to other DERs that can be enrolled in all types of demand-side management programs. So this is a little more about EnergyHub. We have over 30 utility clients, a few more to be announced soon. So I wanted to, I know we've talked a lot about Green Button already today, so maybe just reframe it a little bit, and would like to provide some color to some of the really good questions that the commissioners were asking before. So Green Button is a technical standard schema and implementation guide that provides, among other things, a standard format for the collection of energy billing data for natural gas, energy, and water utilities. And it also provides a interface for the exchange of that data. What I wanted to specifically distinguish on this slide was the difference between Green Button Connect My Data and Green Button Download My Data. So Green Button Connect My Data is that machine-to-machine connection between the utility, their kind of data warehouse, and the third party. And Green Button Download My Data is when a customer logs in and can download their own energy information. Green Button Connect My Data was really the focus of the Green Button initiative. Green Button Download My Data is not as useful. Customers don't really, it's not as useful for customers to just be able to have their energy data. I think a lot of what third parties can do is translate that to make sense to customers. So just wanted to emphasize kind of Green Button Connect My Data was the real focus of Green Button, not Green Button Download My Data. So I know this panel was supposed to talk a little bit about some implementation examples of third-party data access. So on the left, you can see this is a tool from the Center for Sustainable Energy from Southern California. And what they do is you can input your locational information and other information about your home, and in conjunction with the data that this tool is able to collect from Green Button, someone can, it analyzes the economics of putting a solar panel on your roof, and you can see whether or not that makes sense. On the right, this is a screenshot from Lucid, which essentially what they do is they pull in this Green Button data, and each of these little squares are different offices that a property manager owns. So the red shows that this office should be the focus of any sort of energy efficiency initiative. This office needs the most help. So that really helps property managers prioritize and put money where it's going to be most helpful for them. Now I'm just remembering. So one thing I wanted to just quickly talk about with Green Button to distinguish it with EDI is for these CRES providers, it is between the utility and the CRES so the CRES can conduct its business. Green Button is for third parties. So CRES, they are only once a month for kind of billing purposes, and Green Button is all of these other energy services. And I think the saying that Green Button is customer facing, that's probably talking more about Green Button Download My Data versus Green Button Connect, which is, again, that kind of machine-to-machine transfer of information. So sorry to jump back and forth, but I was just remembering that I wanted to clarify that. Okay, so anyway, people are recognizing how important this access to customer data is. This is a map you can see on the blue states are ones that have Green Button type processes in place, and the brown states are ones where it's being considered. Typically, that's in some sort of regulatory proceeding or working group that are trying to kind of work through what is the best process for that state's needs. So diving in a little deeper into some examples of the implementation of Green Button in two particular states. I think in the last panel, people were talking a little bit about Smart Meter Texas. So there is a whole rollout of AMI in Texas in 2008. They developed Smart Meter Texas, which is the centralized repository for all of the utilities to put their AMI data in. And on the left, that's this 10-step process that CSP in Texas is curtailment service provider. Actually, I think that's the same as in PJM. So they had to go through this 10-step process. No one was using the Smart Meter Texas. And they kind of realized that it wasn't really a good investment. And there was a unanimous settlement. I think actually that date might be wrong. It's from December, but between the third parties and the utilities to revamp the Smart Meter Texas portal and to make access to this data a lot simpler. So on the right is this 3-step process. There is an API between the third party and Smart Meter Texas that the CSP sends the customer information to the Smart Meter Texas. Smart Meter Texas automatically sends an email to the customer, and then the customer clicks and says, yes, I have authorized release of my data, and then the data is released. I think Chris was alluding to before how California is doing a lot of work with this as well. So California, this was the process that demand response providers had to go through in 2016 and I believe 2017 as well to get access to their customers' data. They had a customer goes to the third-party site. They enter their name, their address, and their account number, and their email. SAID is account number. And then they get bumped to DocuSign. And that, when we kind of test drived what that looked like on the customer side, and it was really confusing. There's a lot of legal language. There were all these different clicks. There were all these different places to sign. And that process was, we were able to track actually and see how many customers we lost by sending them to this DocuSign process. Now, so they've been working on an improved solution, kind of after our experience that you saw before. We kind of were involved really heavily in Rule 24 in Texas, which is their release of data proceeding. And what's being developed right now, and this is actually, I think, just launched, is a customer basically signs into their utility account. They get bumped to this screen. This is from a mobile perspective, so that's why it's a little small and looks kind of like what you would see on a phone. But it has all the information, so you see kind of all of your account number. It has kind of the description of the program, and then you click to submit. So one of the things that the commission clarified in the proceeding is that a click was a signature, and that is what very consistent with a lot of other industries. That's what people call as the click through, but it's saying the click is a signature. It is agreeing that you're agreeing to the terms and conditions of the program. So these are significant improvements. I wanted to clarify what isn't perfect about these examples. So in California, requiring utility login credentials, we think, leads to significant drop-off in the customer enrollment. So what a lot of, I think, actually CREST-type companies talk about, but a wallet standard. So we shouldn't be asking customers for information that they don't carry in their wallet, or else that's kind of too obscure. You're kind of having to call your your husband or wife, or you have to kind of dig around for that information, and that we see leads to a huge drop-off in customers. The other thing that we wanted to know was sending the customer to a different site and a different portal. We think that diminishes from a streamlined and clear customer experience. On the Texas side, similarly, it requires the retail certificate number and a meter number, which are two kind of pieces of information that don't really pass this wallet standard. We think that the kind of extra click to confirm is an unnecessary extra step. And the Smart Meter Texas portal only allows data sharing for a maximum of 12 months versus actually in California, you can do this indefinite until revoked. And so, that means after 12 months, we have to go back and ask customer to go through the whole process again. So that's also not an ideal customer experience. So here's some data on why this is so important. On the right is that kind of California design where we took them through DocuSign, and between the 100 people, who might have received an offer, only 5 were able to get through the whole thing, whereas we've seen in other programs 42. So that's pretty significant. If we want customers to be able to get involved in these programs, take advantage of energy services, we can't make these processes so complicated.
Laura, which was the left side is what again?
It's just best practice, so that's what we've seen in our other programs. And clarifying a little bit about what we think is an ideal solution, we would like to kind of, on the left is sort of a mobile look and the right is a web look, but have customers provide their information, have a link to the terms and conditions, and kind of collect that information ourselves and then kind of send it to whichever data warehouse exists. So it's almost like a combination of the best pieces of the California and the Texas one. And stepping back, when designing this this data sharing policy. I think the overarching goal is to balance the customer's rights to privacy and security of their personal information to their access to energy information and services. And I think that's kind of the crux of this whole dilemma. And in doing so, kind of wanted to delineate some of the pieces to think about when designing this policy. So what sort of data are we sharing? So I think one of the commissioners asked before, is it just usage data? It's usage data, it's billing data, it's like name, address data, it's PLC data that people were talking about before, so more like system data. So it's whatever there is a confined list, but it needs to be such that these service providers can provide their service. The 4-minute transmission protocol, so Green Button Connect, people have already developed integrations to it. Third parties have already developed the integrations to it. It's secure. It's kind of it already has kind of use cases around the country. Third-party eligibility criteria, kind of wanting to make sure that these third parties like register so they can be, there is some enforcement mechanism if they do, violate some sort of terms of use, which is the next thing. Clear authorization language, so instead of having customers go through pages and pages of DocuSign, or have them look at a screen and not know what they're signing up for, you kind of need a middle ground. You need to have them understand what they're signing up for, but not have it be so confusing. Streamlined customer experience, so not a lot of clicks, not a lot of screens. Testing and production environment for Green Button Connect, needing to kind of make sure that the third party can actually get it to work, so having this testing environment. Revocation process, super important. The customer and the third party have to both be able to stop the data sharing agreement. If that's not clear and streamlined, then you've kind of, you can end up with continuing data sharing when you don't even need it. Enforcement process against bad actors, that Chris already talked about. And if it is kind of a utility designed experience, there needs to be a high quality of service, and there needs to be transparency about what might be the issues happening with the portal. So, and I linked at the bottom to a paper that I worked on talking about all of this stuff that might be a helpful resource for you guys. So yeah, thank you so much. I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Laura. Kristen?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to share my presentation with you. I'd like to start by introducing our company. IGS is a competitive natural gas and electricity supplier. In addition to providing these commodity solutions to both commercial and residential customers, we also offer home services, CNG, rooftop and community solar, and distributed generation. As I mentioned, my name is Kristen Stovell. I've been with IGS for 9 years. In my current role as the Director of Enterprise Analytics, I work to support strategic decision-making by providing unbiased, data-driven, actionable insights to our business leaders. Prior to this role, I led our forecasting and analytics team, responsible for our demand forecast, understanding how much power and gas our customers are going to use. This team also did significant analysis around price and demand. In my time at IGS, I've seen the way that data impacts our customer experience through all aspects of our business, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So to kick it off, I'd like to start by just talking about data. So when I wake up in the morning and I pull out my phone and I scroll through articles, I'm creating data. When I get out of bed, I go and adjust my Nest thermostat, and when I do that, I create data. On my way home from work, I stop at Kroger and buy a few things for my family, and when I do that, I create data. All of this data changes my relationship with each of these companies. And so moving forward, it will change the way that I engage with those companies. So tomorrow when I wake up and I pull out my phone, I'll be given suggestions of articles that I could read based on my previous viewing experience. I won't need to walk to my Nest because it will remember the temperature that I prefer my home to be in the morning. And when I go to Kroger on my way home, I'll be armed with coupons that I was given because Kroger understands my behavior and they understand the types of things that I like to purchase. In my opinion, the same logic applies to commodities. So there are a lot of data elements that we as a supplier get from utilities, but today I'd like to focus more on the data elements that specifically tie to customer behavior. So many of these were already discussed, but I'll step through them briefly. A load profile is something that tells us as a supplier more about how a customer uses their commodity. So specifically, if a customer has a monthly read meter, it helps us to understand more about the granularity of that data. A customer's rate class with their utility explains the way that they are priced through that utility, but also tells us more about them. We've talked a lot about PLC tags. A PLC tag is really important because that helps us understand a customer's capacity obligation, which ultimately helps define our risk associated to serving that customer. And lastly, usage data. So we've spoken at length about usage data, but both interval and monthly usage data allow us to understand that customer behavior more deeply. So I'm going to dig a little further into usage. As a supplier, understanding a commercial customer's interval data as part of our pricing process helps us to understand the volatility in their load, which ultimately helps us to mitigate our risk. As we all know, any risk that isn't able to be quantified will affect the costs that we ultimately incur to serve a customer. The ability to mitigate this risk allows us as a supplier to serve a customer at the lowest cost possible. Additionally, as residential customers continue to convert to smart meters and are no longer settled on the load profile, the access to this data is imperative to ensure that we don't introduce additional risk into our processes. So from a product's perspective, understanding customer behavior through data helps us to make sure that we're providing the products and services that customers really want. Today, we live in the world of the Internet of Things, where society is shifting to the desire to engage with technology in a totally different way. As an industry, we need data to continue to innovate and to provide customers with the products that they're looking for. This opens the door for how we can engage with customers. Whether it's a product that allows you to understand how you use power in your home, or if it's allowing us as a supplier to structure a price that a customer pays for that power. As a supplier, interval data would give us the opportunity to offer products like time of use that would really put a commercial or residential customer in charge of their bill. These are things that we do frequently with larger commercial customers today, but don't always have the opportunity to do with residential customers. I think this becomes increasingly important to residential customers as we see the landscape change for them. So many of the things that we've talked about already today. For example, I can go onto my phone right now and adjust my Nest thermostat at home, but what triggers me to do that? What if there were a price signal that triggered me to do that, that could really help me take advantage of lower prices in the market or mitigate my risk associated to higher prices? What if I were to give someone the opportunity to do that for me, to help me understand that market, which is something that we as a supplier pride ourselves in doing? Additionally, significant benefit exists as we see an increase in the saturation of electric vehicles. So for example, if a customer has an electric vehicle and they come home from work and they pull it into their garage and they plug it in, what if they were on some product that incentivized them to use that power later in the day? Maybe they go and plug that car in before they go to bed because they can take advantage of those lower commodity prices. Not only does that benefit the customer, it also supports reliability of the grid. So to further just explain this perspective, I've put together a simple graph. So this is all published data. AEP does a great job of posting a lot of information on their website. So what this shows you is from left to right, hour ending 1 to hour ending 4 on one of PJM's coincidental peaks from last year. So on this day, this is what a typical residential customer in Columbus Southern Power would look like. So just a standard load profile. And that's the green background that you see. The blue line that you see represents day-ahead prices during that same period of time. And so in the case that we're talking about, if a customer were able to use less power during this high price time, and they were on a product that incentivized them to do that because they were paying these day-ahead prices or something similar, then they would be incentivized to, I would be incentivized to go on my phone and adjust my Nest thermostat from work because I don't necessarily care that my house is cool because I'm not there. And I think it creates that incentive, assuming that that customer settles on that interval meter. So there are benefits to the customer's energy costs, but there are also benefits to their capacity tag. So in this case, the peak that happened in this day happened in hour ending 17. And if this customer, this sample customer that we're discussing, had lowered their usage during that period of time, that could have affected the way that their capacity tag was set, and then ultimately affects their capacity costs for the following year. So moving forward, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we access data from the utilities today. So we've talked a lot about EDI. I think there are a lot of really great applications for EDI. The data is consistent, as we've discussed, it's accurate, and so it's great for billing. But as we're communicating with customers that want to be with IGS, it can be slow. It can take 24 to 48 hours for us to get an EDI transaction back, which isn't a great customer experience if someone is waiting to receive a price from us. Additionally, depending on the utility and the type of data that you're trying to receive, it can be costly. So as I mentioned, there's risk associated to not understanding a customer's usage profile as well as we can. And so as an organization, then we need to weigh that risk and make the determination if it's appropriate to introduce this additional cost or if we want to take the risk associated with not understanding that. So many utilities offer prospect lists that help us to understand information about the customers within their market. These customer lists are great because they're quick. Once we have them, they're easy for us to look at. The problem with a customer list is that because we're receiving that data at a point in time, it may not be the most current data for that customer. Additionally, these lists often are not complete. So in the state of Ohio, we typically do not get a customer's account number, for example. In states like Pennsylvania, we get that account number, and that makes that list a little easier for us to navigate. There are situations where we may also not have access to pieces of data that we feel are really important to understand our risk. For example, like the capacity tag. So we just discussed web portals similar to what AEP has, and those are really great for us because they're quick and the data is current, and it's an easy way for us to dive in and understand that information. The only downsides for us are that it can be labor intensive. So because that process isn't automated, we have an analyst on our end that logs in and gets data for that customer. So if we're looking at a commercial customer that has many, many locations, that process can be cumbersome. Additionally, it's less flexible because if the format of that data changes, it affects our downstream processes and can be cumbersome for us. So in an ideal world, how would we like to look at this data? We've talked a little bit about the benefits of something like an API. So an API is the way that companies like Google allow a single user to have access to a large amount of data. What that would give us is the ability to get data through a secure portal in a quick way with the flexibility of format so that we can get the data back in the format that we need and in an automated way where we wouldn't need someone on our end to log in and access that data. But regardless of the format, I think the things that are really important to us are that the data is consistent, that it's either free or inexpensive, that it's timely, so we are really concerned with our customers' experience and the turnaround time that they get from us, and then that it's current. I think especially as we start to talk about things like interval data, we want the most up-to-date information so that we can mitigate our risk. So in summary, data is really important. Access to data allows us to better understand our risk and provide the lowest cost possible to our customers. Access to data gives us the opportunity to understand our customers in a way that we never have before. It allows us to continuously innovate and ensure that we're giving them the products and services that they really want and need. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Christina, Barb, do you want to take first?
I do have a question regarding, for Laura or anybody, regarding the customer authorization that you have. Does the customer authorization have to be tracked back to a customer's IP address or some type of device to verify authorization from the customer. I just wondered how that worked to be able, if a customer questioned how authorization was received, if there's a way to determine if it was the customer's authorization.
Yeah, so it varies. Just depends on the jurisdiction, the state, the program. So for the California example, the credentials that you use to log into your utility account, that is verifying your identity. That, I guess, we like to think of things as into two compartments, like what is the authentication piece, so like verifying that you are who you are, and then the authorization is really just I agree to the terms and conditions, and I am allowing data sharing to commence. So that for California, that it is the utility credentials. Another example in California, they did use IP address, so that was another way to verify a customer's identity. But the point is that the kinds of identifiable information that you ask from a customer is what is verifying their identity. So sometimes it's just an account number and a zip code, and that is identifying a person's, like, who they are.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe for Laura and Kristen both, could you kind of, what are similarities and differences between Green Button Connect My Data and an application programming interface, just from kind of like a practical understanding level? I mean, is Green Button Connect a type of API, or is it different?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the technical configuration, but API is basically, as someone said, it means application programming interface. It's basically the way that the secure connection between two entities. So that is, I believe that Green Button is a type of API, but you can have an API doing a lot of different types of things.
I'm not as familiar with, as she said, just kind of the technology behind Green Button Connect.
And then Stacey, I had a question for you. I know you guys are, as part of phase 2, looking into the cost effectiveness of Green Button Connect My Data. How are you guys approaching authorization kind of with our current rules and Green Button Connect My Data? Are those separate processes, or are they incorporated at some point? Just
It's in my understanding we're addressing that through the collaborative, which engages as well as interested parties and staff members to evaluate both the benefits, cost, as well as the application within the revised code in Ohio to make sure that it adheres to that.
just generally too, thank you Stacey and Teresa Ringenbach both for helping staff understand all the nuances of these issues. It's been much appreciated.
Okay. Very
I do
good.
have one more question.
Go ahead, Barb.
Regarding the PLC tags and the customer information, I could see where the benefit is at. Is there any harm to a customer who cannot change their PLC tag? Either they can't afford the products and services to help reduce their load or cannot shift their load. Would there be harm to a customer in pricing?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact is, to me, this fundamental shift where we're engaging with the industry differently, right? So today, we use power in the way that we want to based on the relationship that we have with the devices that are in our home. And I think understanding the impact that you could make to your capacity costs or the impact that you could make to your energy price just changes the way that you engage with our industry in that same way. So to answer your question, I think the negative to the customer for not understanding that would be from that perspective. As a supplier, it is imperative that we understand that, because that capacity obligation for that customer represents a cost to us. And so if we can't truly quantify that cost, then we're introducing risk into our pricing process.
If you get access to all the customers' PLCs, but which you don't have today, correct?
Depending on the state and the utility.
In Ohio, you don't
In
have
Ohio,
it today.
that's correct.
And if, so if today you don't have that information and you can't customize your offers to customers that might be able to be done if you did have the PLCs, would it be a disadvantage to customers who can't really take advantage of or respond to their PLC information? Would it be a disadvantage for them to change the way things are currently set up, where you don't have the PLC information and you can't make those kind of distinctions between customers, in a future world where you have the PLC information, you can look at each and every customer and make a customized offer to the customer based on, in part, on the PLC information, so that, I don't know if this is what Barb's question was about, but it certainly raised it with me, which is, would that customer be chagrined that you now have all this information, because not only is it not able to take advantage of the information itself to adjust its load profile, but it turns out that maybe it doesn't get as good an offer from you tomorrow as
Sure.
it does today, because tomorrow you have that information, while today you don't.
I guess I want to make sure I understand your question. So, in my opinion, we all have control over the way that we use power. Assuming that our true information reflects what's settled with PJM, I think that even if you aren't able to have a smart thermostat, you're still able to control the temperature in your home at that point in time, or when you wash laundry, or whatever the case may be. And so I would argue that we all have some level of control. I also have to assume that there's also will still be a large group of customers that aren't taking advantage of that, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yes, thank you.
If I could clarify one item, we do share PLC tags for all customers. They're available in our enrollment list that Kristen mentioned, as well as transmission tags. Those are costs that, to serve a customer in the market, suppliers need to understand that obligation in PJM. And those PLC values do not change until the following year after customer has modified their load, and we recalculate those tags. What is valuable for them also in calculating a pricing bid is that interval load shape, so that they can see how a customer may be able to modify their behavior and possibly reduce that tag for the next year, thereby reducing cost.
I would just add too, I think, hypothetically at least, if all these below average customers chose to shop because they have individual PLC values that can be monetized and they can pay less, I think you could consider that the SSO price eventually may go up if it's those that are not able to or not choosing to respond. And so over the long term, the SSO capacity price could go up slightly. But I would say that really isn't aligned with cost causation principles, where customers are paying for the actual, charges that they're causing to the system.
Okay, great. Tom?
Thank you very much. It's a great panel, and in many ways, some of the particularly data issues that we are talking about are some of the most fundamental questions as we move forward. And so I appreciate your candor, and but I'm gonna say that, and I think that we all can. I think we could agree that utilities have changed, and it's not quite like working with them. I mean, they've moved forward on this issue, but I think you would also tell me, if you were just speaking to me, I'll probably make you say it publicly. You need more data, and you need it quicker. And we have some states out there that you deal with that it is quicker, and you've given us some alternatives to how it should be, how data should be controlled and who should control it and all that. I guess my question is, have you ever seen, have you, I mean, is it possible for the utility to continue to, oversee this area, but still provide you with the information that you need, and as quickly as you need it?
Yeah, I guess sounds like a question I should answer. So I think that I really like the way that it's being done in Texas, even though there are these issues, but the way it will be rolled out in the future, where it is sort of a centralized repository where all the utilities are putting their information into one location, and that actually makes it a lot easier for third parties to just access one point versus a lot of different points for a lot of the utilities. That said, I don't know if the utility, it can't, I think the utility's already set up and already is the custodian of this information. So from potentially a cost perspective, it might be more straightforward to have the utility to continue to do that. I think the key changes lie in how the process works for the third parties to access that data, so and get the customer consent, but also making sure that when the utilities develop their data repositories, there are certain performance standards that they're held to. So in California, there are a list of performance metrics that the utilities in developing their whole system need to stand by: the frequency of data that's provided, the accuracy of the data that's provided. So I think as long as and as well that the third party can design the customer experience. I think a lot of the hiccup now is not necessarily that we can't figure out a solution to make an API between a utility and a third party, because we can. I think it's more that we are not able to streamline the customer process to make it so we can even get ourselves set up to begin accessing that data.
Stacey?
I guess I have a couple comments on that. First, when we talk about Texas, we have to recognize that how Texas evolved, and I like to call it the Big Bang approach. There was, I think it was SB 7, really said this is the way we're going to do it, and everybody's going to do it the same way, and here's everybody's roles and responsibilities. So everybody left the station at the same time. In Ohio, the utilities have all left the station at slightly different times. We are moving generally in the same direction. With that said, our systems have evolved slightly differently over time. So we have some capital investments we've already made that by changing that construct, a lot of those capital investments will be written off as O&M. The other thing I'll say is we've talked a lot about API. That's actually technology we're looking at to deploy in our business partner portal for the LOA process. So when we implemented the portal several years ago, and I mentioned that we worked with suppliers and said, what do you want? What's working in other markets? That's the way we built it. And the pace of technology is such, which you've already heard a lot about, that even a few years ago, there are new benefits and functionality and needs that the market is asking for. So early next year, when we deploy the next phase of our portal, suppliers will be able to utilize an API connection for their LOA process, so that if they're in a kiosk with a customer and they have a notepad and the customer signs digitally on the notepad their name, it connects immediately to our portal and makes the data available. So that technology is becoming more prevalent And I suspect these systems will continue to evolve as technology evolves.
I guess I would just echo a lot of what's already been said. At the end of the day, there are already processes to get authorization. There are already processes to get data. And so really the question is just around how do we enhance the customer experience so that those things can be done in a more efficient way, and then that the granularity that we receive data is appropriate. And so I certainly think that we can get there. I think it's just about exactly the conversation that we're having today about innovation, about having the right people in the room and making sure that we're looking at appropriate technology.
Just one thing to add, I think the reason why we bring up green button so much in this conversation is because even if there are utility systems that are designed differently, if there's a standard protocol and way for the third parties to access that data, then it becomes something that's a little bit more scalable.
Dan, anything else?
Just for clarification, is green button, is it an application program interface type, or is it something else? Is it's different than an, that's my first question. My second question is, Kristen, if you have access to data through a method like green button, does that get you to your ideal access to data goal, or is it not get you there? Is green button not adequate to get you to the best result?
I don't think that I have a deep enough understanding of green button to answer that question.
And just one thing to try and answer your first question a little bit better than I did maybe before is green button is a set of standards and a common format, a common way to exchange the data. An API is a generalized way to describe, I think, machine-to-machine conversations. So green button is just is a standard that has more specifications on how that's implemented, versus just like an API is a generalized term for when machines do that. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Larry.
First of all, thank you. It's a great panel. Kristen, you brought up the issue of risk and the impact of risk on customer pricing. So, Stacey, you had indicated that data is nothing more than data, and many years ago, a former colleague once told me that he was drowning in a sea of data, yet thirsting for meaningful information. So. Thank you, Tom. Anyway, so I actually am kind of relating back to Kristen's point, and that is that meaningful information, I assume, would require a reconfiguration of the data in your data systems. Here, I guess here's the ultimate question. You pointed out that each of the utilities are in a different starting place and a different state of being at present for perfectly understandable reasons. Would your information system allow a third party to request a kind of like a reconfiguration of your data so that you can extract it from your system and provide it in a way that becomes information for that third party? And if the answer to that question is no, assuming you understand, because I'm not particularly articulate asking it, does that then not maybe support a notion of a centralized repository? In other words, if it's going to take system enhancements to get each and every utility to a point where it can provide flexible and meaningful information, whether it be through an API or another protocol, does that not support the concept for a centralized repository?
Yeah, and systems is a big term, so that it can be a CIS system, which can be a challenge to interface with. Generally, when we're talking about data that we are sharing with suppliers, we're either doing EDI, which it works. I mean, it is a system that it's the glue that keeps our systems in sync by transferring files, is the best way to describe it. What we're talking about today is with APIs is really system connectivity, which is, as I alluded to, is something that we're going to test with the LOA process so that our system immediately knows when an LOA is received from a customer so that the information can be shared and download instantaneously by the suppliers. So capacity to do that is possible. How, obviously we would have to look at how much additional hardware may be needed for that, because now you have the potential of what we may have 60, 70 active suppliers in our service territory, that if we're in a state where every Saturday, when you go to a kiosk or a mall, there's 6 or 7 of them with real-time connectivity to our systems, that requires additional hardware that has to be invested to be able to support that demand on our system. So if we're talking about our customer information system, that is not something that we would do. If you're talking about like a Hadoop system or a data repository where we keep our validated data, to be honest, that's something that we're starting to dabble with the LOA process.
Okay.
Now, downloading, connecting reams of interval data from multiple customers, that's an increase on capacity for our system. So it would be a lot of work, but I think it could be staged in a way where if we collectively had the end game in mind and we knew that's where we were going as a state, then I think it could be achievable.
Okay. Thank you. As we have gone through phases 1 and 2 and now partially 3, it seems to me that some of the modernization aspects of what it is that's been discussed is system facing, some is customer facing. So maybe revisiting the whole issue of privacy. Let's get beyond consent for the time being. But there are some opportunities, I think, for third parties to have behind-the-meter applications that actually help the system in terms of load management and aggregation for demand response and things of that nature. Would the willingness, and this may be an unfair question and you decline to answer it, that's okay. Would the willingness of a utility in terms of sharing information be, the standards applied be different if it is a system-facing data share as opposed to a customer-facing data share?
I think it would, because if our obligation, and this is clearly something that we are working with AMI Phase 2 Collaborative on, and in terms of how we may implement a home area network protocol functionality for our customers, which would provide Zigbee access to that data. So the data that they will receive from the meter is really telemetric. There's no, their bank account's not in there, social security number's not in there. Now, customers are very sensitive, as we already talked about, in terms of sharing their load with third parties without their consent. But this is a situation where the customer would be working directly with a third party, buy something at Lowe's, install it, and we would have to have the back office system to pair that with our meter to provide that stream of data from the meter. So I think going into the house is there's really an agreement between the customer and a third party. And I think that is where the responsibilities lie. If that data is used, let's say a supplier offers a hand network for a customer that provides different services. Now, if that supplier chooses to share that interval usage outside of that agreement with the customer, then that supplier is really on the hook for that with the customer and not living up to that agreement. What the utilities have done is provided, as I've called the connected backbone, to be able to allow that to happen in the home with a hand system. And again, that's something that we're exploring right now with our collaborative.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't feel obliged. Any other comments? No? Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Beth? Okay, so In this evolving world of technology, we have a question from Twitter. All right. OAuth 2, OAuth2 is an industry standard and well-defined in terms of security. Consumers are used to its flow from its use by Google and others. Why shouldn't it be used for customer approval for third-party data sharing? Any thoughts on that?
So OAuth is, I'm not sure exactly what OAuth 2 is, but I'm pretty sure that OAuth generally is sort of like what California is implementing. So it's, I guess the difference is that you're not kind of being, what OAuth is really is, I believe, is sort of like a pop-up, and then you kind of enter your say like your utility credentials, and then you kind of go back to the third-party screen. I guess it's sort of similar to what California's doing, but California is kind of moving you to the utility portal. That's definitely something that is being discussed. I don't know if I think that just the maybe the pop-up functionality was more difficult for the utility to implement than kind of moving you over to the portal screen. But I don't know if that's something that's off the table or vastly different than what is actually being implemented.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? No? Okay. Hey, Stacey, so for your third-party data accessibility slide, where you've got all of these different requesters of customer data, there appear to be all of these different mechanisms that you're utilizing to push that data over to these folks. So let's, I think we've got a good understanding of the EDI portion of it, what it's for, what its use is, and then, we keep, free advertisement for Green Button, right? We keep talking about Green Button as the customer sort of interfacing component of the data world. I'm more interested right now in that particular piece.
In which piece?
The customer interfacing data piece, where they actually are able to, or you authorize the ability for customer really usage data to be pushed out to whomever. So when you look at the slew of arrows here, for whichever of these are customer usage oriented, so not an EDI piece of data associated with like the address or whatever other pieces of EDI there are, should there be some uniformity there? Because it seems like there are a number of different mechanisms that are utilized to provide information to these third parties.
Yeah, and a lot of this has evolved over time. So we've been, we've had PIP and interfacing with them for years, well before we established a lot of the EDI standards. A lot of the EDI standards were developed leveraging other markets, quite honestly, what was working, what wasn't working. And the web portal has evolved as technology has evolved, quite honestly. So I think this is going to continue to change over time as technology changes. So tomorrow it may not be EDI. It may be only API. Now that's a cost hurdle to get there, but that's a possibility. There's a lot of, keep in mind though, by doing that, there's a lot of suppliers that have invested heavily in these systems to keep our systems in sync that will have to change.
Yeah.
And the utilities will have to change.
Right.
So that has always been our challenge in this space. As technology evolves and the newest, latest things out there, we have a request to modify our system to support that. Gone are the days where utilities invest in something and it has a 30-year depreciation life, right? So software, typically a 5-year depreciation. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So I'm wondering about this concept of standardization, mutual sharing of systems in order to create cost savings from AEP's perspective, I mean, are these practical things, or do you think that sort of the ship has already left the dock? Now, with AEP, you guys are ahead of the game. And with our 3 other EDUs, I think there's probably still some work to be done from the ground level associated with developing the infrastructure and then necessities surrounding all things data. So, in your ideal world, having dealt with and looked at these issues for some time, without speaking for the other EDUs, what would be, assuming that there would be a way to, with 3 of our EDUs, sort of, not starting from ground up, but starting from a particular positioning that is somewhat behind where you are, what is sort of the desired outcome for standardization and possible sharing? Well, from our perspective, sharing of costs would be wonderful. I mean, let me just throw that out there. I mean, we would love for you, not just AEP to build out a system and then FE and then Duke and Dayton for obvious reasons, right? You could collectively share those costs and the burden to ratepayers. We would love to see that happen. But I wonder from a technical perspective, has the ship left the dock there?
It has somewhat. We've invested, and keep in mind, it's not just changes from AEP that would have to be made. The suppliers in the market have made changes to adapt to our systems. And that's why with EDI, we've tried to strive towards standardization. It's not insurmountable to get there, but there have been significant costs that have been already invested in these systems, and we are still investing in them now to support where we're going with AMI. So that's where our business partner portal is, where we're going to make available all of the interval data for our customers with AMI meters. And we, quite honestly, we've modeled some things that have worked in the Texas market and Illinois market to design it based upon input. And again, technology has changed. So to your point, can it be done? Yes. We could have one common system for all of Ohio utilities to access interval data for AMI customers. I would encourage you to look at the costs that have been invested in the Texas market in the SMT versus some of the costs that we have made prudently in our systems before we go there.
What if you're out ahead of the pack, what about the concept of, and I know you're not going to want to speak for the other 3 EDUs, but what about the concept of, does it create sort of economies of efficiency if the other 3 EDUs sort of follow your path, whether it be with the type of meters deployed, with a number of other sort of facets of the infrastructure investment?
There are, and certainly for the suppliers, any time that you can find standards in the market, they're going to applaud. And we have chosen certain metering vendors across most of our system based upon relationships with GE and Itron and other vendors that we've had long relationships with, and Silver Springs. So yes, I think there are benefits to standards with a common repository of data where all the data is in a standard format. You can have different meters and push that data to a repository. For example, our portal has MV90 data coming from Itron meters as well as it does from AMI meters coming from newer types of smart meters.
So regardless of who makes the meter, as long as the data is standardized eventually.
Adhere to data standards, yes, that's right. And that's what MDM, or meter data management system, does. It brings all of that data into a common repository, which can then be pushed out to other systems.
Very good. So Laura, on the map that you have in your slide presentation, there's no business being done in Ohio by EnergyHub, and so I'm just.
You mean where we have programs?
Yep.
EnergyHub? Okay.
And so I'm sort of asking you to sort of back into the map and talk about why that's the case. And outside of you just not having negotiated an opportunity with the utility, I mean, that aside,
Yeah.
I mean, from purely a technical perspective, what are we missing for you to be able to get in the Ohio game?
So this isn't the actual slide, if you want to move to, yeah, earlier. Yeah, okay, that's us. From a technical perspective, what this slide shows is a mix of our utility programs and our what we call capacity or market programs. For the utility programs, that's the kind of the majority of what you see on this map. And for that, typically we are actually providing the data to the utility. We use thermostat runtime to demonstrate demand reduction savings. So in terms of why we're not in Ohio, because I guess the utilities haven't put demand response funding in their rate case or in their filings. I think we're on the residential scale. We're not commercial. So what our typical model is for a utility, we will use our connections via the thermostat brands and enroll people who have smart thermostats in our program or other DERs, and kind of aggregate them together and provide meaningful load shed for a utility. But why we're not in Ohio, from a technical standpoint, I don't, on the market side, it's because there is no green button. I mean, if we could bid into PJM, if we were able to get data access in a kind of streamlined way. But from a utility program perspective, that's just because the utilities haven't put out an RFP for something like us.
Okay. And then when you talk about the concept of having customer authorization fully designed by a third party, what would be sort of the, there's an element of fear associated with that when I think about it, because it's like, gajillion third parties potentially. But what are some of the elements of commonality that you think would have to be there for this to be handled appropriately?
Well, so on the last slide, I talked a little bit about the elements of a data sharing policy, but essentially, you need to make sure that a third party is that there are like specific criteria for them to be registered. Requiring contact information, ID number, certificate of good standing at the state, technical interoperability with utilities Green Button Connect platform, and then agreeing to a binding terms of use. So when should be a contractual agreement between the third parties and the utility that addresses that the third party has a privacy policy, that there are prohibited uses, that there's a waiver of liability. So I think in terms of just making sure they're not just people trying to get data, there needs to be an enforcement mechanism and a way for third parties to register. The reason why we have stressed so much to have the third parties design the customer experience is because it aligns incentives. So we, as a third party, are incentivized to make the customer experience as best as possible to enroll in our programs. Our programs might be different from another third party's program. So we can customize the experience to be particular to ours. And say we want to make it better because another competitor is enrolling people at a faster rate, we can innovate quickly to make that change. So we believe that that's really paramount to kind of mass market adoption of these types of programs.
Okay. Any other questions? Round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. Okay, wonderful morning regarding data. We're going to discuss cybersecurity at 1:30. We are adjourned till then. Thank you.